Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 7 of the Top 2 Inches Rugby Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by I Spy Surveys, the go-to specialist survey and inspection company based in Exeter, Devon. So, what is going down on this episode? We're going to have a look at the next game in the Tri-Nations between Australia and New Zealand. We'll check in with the ladies' game and see if Exeter have recorded their first victory in the Allianz Premier 15. I'm going to have a look at the Eight Nations tournament that is starting on the weekend. Obviously, that can be watched on Prime, which is a new kind of potentially a way of doing things. So maybe I'll have a little look at what TV companies or organisations cover the rugby the best. I will also, with the Premiership starting on the 20th to the 22nd of November, I thought I'd run through the teams. Start off with a couple of teams each week in the build-up to the competition starting. Have a look at who's kind of being signed and what their chances are to progress this season. So this episode, I'm going to have a look at the newly promoted Newcastle Falcons and also my team Leicester Tigers. Obviously we'll have the Rugby Fact of the week, another interesting one, and then we will round up with the end of the show looking forward. You're listening to the Top 2 Inches Rugby Podcast. 8 teams, 4 weeks, 2 groups, 1 winner at the end of it all. The Autumn Nations Cup is kicking off this weekend, with the Six Nation teams being joined by Fiji and Georgia in this new and innovative international tournament, replacing the Autumn Internationals. So with the 2020 Championship only just in the rearview mirror, the inaugural competition will provide the 8 nations involved the opportunity to conclude 2020, hopefully, on a high. And in my opinion, there are no shortages of storylines to keep our eyes open for. Can England add another trophy to the cabinet? Possibly. Will Scotland maintain their momentum? Hopefully. How will Ireland and Wales bounce back? Not sure. And can the French resurgence provide some silverware? So French. Hopefully it could. So all those questions and so many more, like how are Georgia going to get on, will be taking place over the next few weeks. How does the tournament work? So, from what I've read, there's 2 groups. In Group A, we've got England, Ireland, Wales and Georgia, with Group B comprising of France, Scotland and Italy. Like I said, the action gets kicking off this weekend on the 13th, 14th and 15th of November. First game between Ireland and Wales at the Aviva on Friday night. The next day, we will see England getting their campaign up and running against Georgia, while Italy welcome Scotland before France entertain Fiji on Sunday. The Autumn Nations Cup concludes on the 5th and the 6th of December with a special final round of matches, which will be based on the pool rankings coming into the final weekend. Each team will face off against the team ranked in their same position in the opposite pool. The format which promises some intriguing and unexpected clashes. So let's just have a little focus on Group A. What's going to happen? Where else to start? England clinched their first championship title since 2017 following their enthralling Super Saturday win against Italy to edge out France by the slimmest of margins, basically winning on points difference. Eddie Jones' team, like I said, beat Italy 34-5. And obviously, like we've spoken about, Ben Young's, the scrum half, got his 100 cap. While the French team beat Ireland in Paris, but not enough to leap England to win the game. Owen Farrell and co. Have had a little time to celebrate their success, and England are already getting their sights set on the silverware from the Autumn Nations Cup. Standing in their way in this group, obviously, we've got rivals Ireland and Wales, and Georgia, I think personally, are going to hopefully provide a stern test as well. England defeated both Ireland and Wales en route to winning the Triple Crown this year. The winning tournament opening match between Ireland and Wales could prove decisive if either side are to finish top of Group A. and they'll earn a shot at the title. I think Georgia could spring a surprise, possibly against Wales, and yeah, I think England have got to be the front runners given their recent victory. They didn't look great in the first half against Italy, as we talked about last week, but they came good in the end. Andy Farrell's Ireland, I think, have probably been misfiring, as have Pivac's Wales. Personally, I think this is probably the stronger of the two groups. And I do see potentially it going England, Ireland, Wales, and Georgia propping up the bottom. So let's move on to Group B. I think France have got to be the contenders in this group. But obviously I do recognise the fact that they did lose to Scotland in the Six Nations, and they did concede a losing bonus point to England. But they do have Anton Dupont and Intermac, getting their attack firing, and obviously Sean Edwards is leading their defence. Fiji, though, unpredictable Fiji. They ain't going to be easy. Am I right in thinking, though, I am less confident that Fiji will go well in this tournament now Randrandra is injured? I'm sure I read somewhere he was out of the tournament. If I'm wrong, then I think Fiji have more of an opportunity in this tournament. Scotland, obviously, it wasn't a great game against Wales, but they play considerably better than Wales, in my opinion. And I think potentially Scotland could be fighting it out with France for the title. I know that seems a little bit forward thinking, maybe, but I think Scotland have definitely turned a corner, and certainly should offer more of a harder team to beat this time around. Italy, unfortunately, I think we're going to see Italy propping up the bottom of the table. I don't think they will beat Scotland. I don't think they'll beat France, and I don't think they'll beat Fiji. If I'm honest, it's going to be an interesting Group B. So where can we watch this? So Amazon Prime, my understanding, will have all the games. And I think also Channel 4 might be doing some highlights, or might also be playing some of the games. So it's going to be, if you've got Prime, fantastic. Thankfully for me, I do have Prime. I don't pay for Prime. My brother does, and I jump on the bandwagon. So my weekends are sorted. Once the kids are squared away and sorted out and given something to do, it's all about the ruggers on the weekend for me. So looking forward to this. It's going to be a fantastic tournament, and hopefully it's one that we will see progress more. And just on that, like I said, Amazon Prime, is this going to be the new way forward? Will we see BT Sport maintaining their coverage of the Premiership? I hope so. I don't see there's any issue, with Amazon Prime having this competition running every autumn. Obviously, BBC, ITV share the Six Nations when that's on. For me, I've got to be honest, I think the coverage and the commentary and the pundits on the Six Nations probably need a bit of a refreshment really. I thought Dylan Hartley, when he did some comms or some punditry on there, he was really good. Flatman, I think, should potentially be on there. He's fantastic. Durden Smith would probably be better than Irvin. I just think the Six Nations, in terms of their commentary, punditry, needs a bit of a shake-up. You look at BT Sports, you've got Lawrence Dallaglio, Dorse was on there, Healy was on there, Ugo Monya's on there, O'Driscoll's on there. They have guests coming on. It's much more vibrant, it's much more alive, it's much more in-depth, because it's people that have only recently left the game. Whereas the BBC, you've got the likes of Jerry Guscott, who, don't get me wrong, was a fantastic player, but his game was completely different to what the game is played now. Interestingly, for the Autumn Nations Cup, I'm not 100% sure who the pundits and the commentators are. Let me just see if I can find out. Have a quick. No, I should have done my research beforehand, really, and had a look at that. Anyway, hopefully they'll be a lot more up to date. They'll be a lot more vibrant. I've got a feeling Dylan Hartley is actually one of them. I'm sure I read that somewhere. So for me, yeah, this Amazon Prime multi-million, company could be quite interesting. I just hope they get the punditry, the commentary right, and it's a really good tournament that can be enjoyed by everybody that has access to Amazon Prime. Let's take a look at the Allianz Premier 15s and look back at the most latest round of matches. We had games again between Exeter Worcester, Gloucester Hartpury Saracens, Loughborough Lightning, Harlequins, Sale Bristol and Wasps DMP or Darlington. Exeter Ladies secured their first win of the season. And this is the first win by one of the two new clubs in the tournament this year, and it's a bit of an important marker, I think, for the future of the game. They were playing Worcester, and Exeter beat Worcester 19-7. I think from the highlights that I saw, it was obviously quite a close game. Worcester took an early lead with Exeter Chiefs fighting back. It was a good game, and I think, like I said previously on previous episode, Exeter are kind of building. It's going to take them a few games to kind of get into the rhythm of how the coach wants them to play. But from what I watched, it was quite an impressive victory over the Worcester Warriors Ladies. Something that is really causing me some concern is DMP, or the Darlington Meadow Park. Unfortunately, they lost again this round. They were beaten 105-0 by Wasp Ladies, and they so far have shipped 338 points in the 4 rounds. That's desperately sad for the players and the staff that are involved. And I'm just wondering if the RFU need to look into why, things have come to this unacceptable position. The league can't really afford clubs to be suffering like this for the next 3 seasons. It's not fair on the players, all the staff that are involved. It's who wants to keep getting tanked every week. It's just, I'm not sure what could be done, but it's certainly something that needs to be looked at. Next game was an interesting one between Loughborough Lightning and Quins. Now, I quite like Loughborough Lightning, mainly because Emily Scarrett plays for them, and I think she's a fantastic player. And I thought, to be honest with you, this was going to be more of a closer encounter between the two sides. Harlequins ran out 33-17 winners, which I was quite surprised about. It was quite a free-flowing game. Defences were on top at times, and individual players kind of stood out for each side. And it was another victory for Harlequins. That's 4 from 4 for them, and we currently see them sitting at the top of the table. Next game was between Gloucester Hartpury and Saracens. Again, Gloucester Hartpury have quite a few red roses in their side, but this turned out to be quite a one-sided affair for Saracens Ladies, running out 43-5 victors. I think Saracens are joint top of the league with Harlequins, and like I said, both have won 4 games out of 4. And both have got bonus points victories and sit at the top on 20 points each. So it's looking like those two, unless a lot changes, could be battling it out for the title again this year. Another interesting game, Bristol beat Sale 40-18. Again, another one-sided affair in this round for them. Not got a great understanding of what happened in that game. Haven't actually seen the highlights. Bristol currently sit mid-table with played 4, won 2, lost 2, but have collected 3 bonus points and sit at mid-table with 11. There is quite, looking at the table, you can sort of see quite a divide at the moment. Sale and our DMPD are at the bottom. Sale are yet to record a win. They are 1 game behind. Obviously, there was a postponed game with Gloucester Hartbury. And then Exeter and Worcester on 6 points, with Gloucester on 7. As I said, Bristol with 11. So we can always see there's a gulf kind of breaking up the two kind of bottom and top of the league. And then Wasp Ladies sit on 14, Loughborough Lightning on 15. And as I said, Quins and Saracens are currently running away with the Allianz Premiership 15. 2 Red Roses from the Italy game were not scheduled to take part in round 4. Kildun and Talling both sort of sat out games for their respective clubs this week. So on to round 5. It will be, I think, next week. We'll report back. Hopefully Exeter Ladies can potentially get another win, and hopefully poor old Darlington won't get another ton handed out to them by the opposition. This week's Rugby Fact comes from France. French rugby player Gaston Varilis missed his international debut against Scotland in 1910, all because of a sandwich. When the team train stopped at Lyon, Vasali nipped to the buffet, but the queue was so long that by the time he returned to the platform, the train was disappearing into the distance. He was never picked for his country again. So French. That was this week's Rugby Fact. So let's have a chat about this Tri-Nations game between Australia and New Zealand, which saw Australia come out on top 24-22 against New Zealand. Interesting game. There was 2 red cards. The New Zealand prop Tunglafawi, I think, or Tunglafa, I can't say his name, sorry, was red carded. Pretty much, to me, having watched some of the highlights, I would say it was a red card, and rightly so. He was dismissed. I don't think there were necessarily mitigating circumstances, and the right decision was made. And then the Australian debutant, Lockie Swinton. Sorry, he was also red carded for a shoulder charge on New Zealand's second row, Whitelock, that's the one, and was sent off the park. Again, I thought it was fair red card, really. You know, the World Rugby have introduced these rules like a couple of years ago now, I think, to try and get players to tackle lower. Player welfare being a very important aspect, and yet unfortunately we're still seeing these instances, and if someone takes a shoulder to the face, or it's an out and out red card. So I think the referee on both those occasions made the right decision. I mean, ultimately it was a meaningless kind of game, but it certainly wasn't played that way. As we know, New Zealand had already retained the Bledisloe Cup, but Australia came out fighting with some, fantastic displays. Individual talent was clearly on show, and they looked a little bit more as a cohesive unit. The Tongan Thor, he came on, made an impact, and if he doesn't start for Australia in the future, then something's definitely wrong with the game, because that boy is a big player, and not just a big bloke. I mean, literally, have you seen the thighs on the fella? He is huge, but is quick as hell as well. So yeah, as a prop, he was very impressive. And the game, it was a frantic pace. It was big aggression, big hits. And he just kind of got this sense there was an absence of level-headed coolness. that kind of defies a champion side at the peak of their powers. But yeah, it's an interesting one. New Zealand obviously don't lose many, but fair play to Australia. They certainly came out and put the writing on the wall for the All Blacks in this game. Okay, so the Gallagher Premiership starts on the weekend of the 20th to the 22nd of November. And I'm going to have a chat. Originally in the introduction I said I was going to focus on two teams, but I realised it's the 10th of November, and I don't actually have many days until the start, so I'm probably going to have to do a few more teams. So I am going to start with Newcastle. Obviously Newcastle were in the Championship last season, and are promoted to the Premiership at the expense of relegated Saracens. How well are Newcastle going to do this season? In all honesty, looking at the team, they've got a few guys they've brought in. Obviously Luther Burrell has come back from Rugby League, and they have also signed the Italian international Fuse into the squad. They've still got people like Matavesi, Sonotti, and the potential. My view is that I think they're probably going to be, I don't know, round the bottom probably, if I'm honest. I don't really fancy their chances. Obviously their season didn't end as they would have liked, and obviously winning the Championship. They were promoted following the pandemic. Are they going to survive? I don't know. I think they're probably going to be in a relegation battle again this season, especially as after last weekend they had a warm-up game against Ealing Trailfinders, who are in the Championship next season, and lost. They've got another game this weekend, and obviously Dean Richards is going to be looking for improvement. But yeah, I do think that they will be in a relegation dogfight come the end of the season. And sadly, I think they will also be in that fight with my team, Leicester Tigers. Obviously, Leicester have been on a downward spiral over the last few years. And although they have made a number of signings, one of the most important ones being Steve Borthwick. Obviously, the end of the 2019-2020 season didn't go very well for them, and obviously if Saracens hadn't been relegated for their off-field misdemeanours, then unfortunately the Tigers would be in the Championship. There's no getting away from that. I don't think they've had enough time to cement the pattern or new patterns that they want to play. And Borthers, I think it's going to take him time. It might take time and might see them actually relegated this season, down in the Championship, and then build to come back up. I'm really worried for Tigers, and I do think, especially with the international players being away for the Autumn Nations Championship, and then being restricted to the number of games they can actually play for the season. I think it's going to be another tough old year for Tigers. And if you want me to be brutally honest, and Ollie, my best mate, will love this, I actually think Tigers will be relegated this year, which is a massively sad thing to say. But yeah, I'm not holding out much hope. Equally, Worcester. Worcester have been in a dogfight the last few seasons. They've got some great players. You've got the likes of Ted Hill, Dougie Weir, and what's the scrum half called? The South African lad. Can't think of his name. But they have good games and they have bad games. They're not a consistently good team. I think that they will also be down the bottom of the table. Might be just slightly more clear of the dogfight at the bottom. Like I said, I do think it's probably going to be Newcastle and Tigers fighting it out for relegation. But they will be down near the bottom of the table again, unfortunately. Don't get me wrong, they're a good team. They did well during the restart, winning a few games. But again, I don't think they're going to have many players out for this Autumn Cup, etc. But they'll be down the bottom struggling, I think. Northampton, obviously, probably the worst team coming out of the restart in 2019-2020 season. They need to turn things around. Again, they've got a fantastic coach. They've got some quality players. But quite clearly at the restart, they weren't gelled together, and they didn't, whatever plan they kind of had didn't really work for them. I'm hoping that their pre-season's gone well. You've got the likes of Norivaro, Biggar. Obviously Biggar and Norivaro are probably going to be away with Fiji and Wales respectively. They've still got Nick Ezekwe. I don't think he's in Eddie Jones's reckoning for this tournament. So he's a quality player. Do you know what? Northampton, I think they're going to be in the dogfight towards the bottom as well. Probably more with Worcester Warriors. I think they've probably got a little bit more about them. They're going to be in towards the bottom of the table. I think London Irish likely the same. Down near the bottom of the table. London Irish again, they've managed to stay up this season, like I said, primarily due to Sarries. They've got some good quality players. Hassel Collins, he's a good winger. They've got a few Aussie players in there. Names always forget me. Is it Kefu and the scrum half lad? And they've got the centre loader. But unless they get a good run going, I think they are potentially going to be down the bottom as well. Bottom to mid-table maybe. I think they'll probably do a little bit better than last year, but I think they're still going to struggle. It's going to be an interesting tournament for the teams down the bottom, and I think the impact of not having the England or international boys at their disposal is going to have a big impact on them. And we'll see what happens when that starts. It's time to have a look at social media, and thankfully a few people have sent in some questions, which is grateful because obviously there wasn't much ruggers this weekend just gone, and to fill some time with discussion is fantastic. First question is in respect of the Autumn Nations, the Autumn Nations Cup, and Eddie Jones's recent comments around a hybrid player. I think in the news he said he's going to select 9 forwards and 6 backs, which is suggesting that he might be experimenting against Georgia. And then the question is, with Eddie Jones's recent comments around a hybrid player, what are your thoughts about this? Eddie Jones, I think we all know, and quite a few podcasts have kind of said that he likes to he likes to get journalists talking, and he likes to make statements that get people thinking. I think it would depend on the position that he was considering to make a hybrid. For example, you couldn't have a scrum half who was formerly a flanker. Look how it went for Bergamasco with Italy. It was terrible. You couldn't necessarily have a 13 flanker, playing at 13. It's interesting. The game is a very fast pace, and flankers, for example, are of good handling skills, are good in defence, and are would you see Brian O'Driscoll as a flanker? You potentially could, to be fair, because he's quite strong. He's not overly big, in the kind of like Neil Back-esque physique over the ball. He was always good over the ball in the rucks. There is some kind of substance to what Eddie is saying, but I do question whether he's just kind of saying this to, as he has done in the past, the start of a new tournament, take the pressure off the actual England team, and get it focused on him, and get people talking that way. So we'll move on to the next question. If you were able to listen to one game or watch one game over and over, which game would that be? A bit of an interesting question, that one. Thank you very much. I think for me it would have to be a toss-up between being an Englishman, the 2003 World Cup final, England-Australia, which I didn't actually watch live because I was working, but was listening to it on the radio. I would probably go with that one. It was just a fantastic game between two great nations, and obviously the first time that England lifted any form of World Cup since the 1966 Football World Cup. So yeah, I would probably say that one. Or I do have to say that the final between the European Cup final, when Leicester did the double, that was a cracking game to watch as well, and one I could potentially watch over and over again. Moving on to the final question: are Wales in a state of turmoil? Is it time for Pivac to go? What is happening? So I think I've spoken about this before. For me, you've got to look at the fact that Warren Gatland has been there for 13 odd years. He had his ups and downs, and any new coach that comes in needs to kind of get that balance right and get the team focused and moving in the right direction, and that will take time. Interesting that they got rid of their defensive coach just before the start of the Autumn Nations Cup. I'm not sure that's probably the best bit of business, but if they don't give him time to get his systems in place, get the players working how they want to work, how he wants them to work, it'll be a bit of a case of what was the point in Pivac anyway. And I think if Wales want to move away from what everybody knows is kind of Gatland and Gatland ball, Pivac is the man to do that. Look at what he did for Scarlets. He got them into, I think it was the semi-final of the European Cup, him and Stephen Jones. So I think people just need to give him time to bed in what he wants to do, the systems that he wants to play. Let him have time for the players to understand this. Maybe look to the future. Again, comments around Alan Wynne-Jones. Is he past it? Is he not? Alan from Wales, he's a quality player, but he is coming to the end of his career, and maybe they need to start looking at the youth and bringing in people and getting them experience in this type of competition. And that would be my kind of answer to that question. So like I said, thank you very much again for the questions. If you would like to send any more in, please check me out on Twitter at the Top 2 Inches RP. Drop me an email, and I'll get the questions on the show in the social media section. So that was episode 7 of the Top 2 Inches Rugby podcast, sponsored by I Spy Surveys. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Next week, looking ahead, I'll have a look at the game between Argentina and New Zealand in the Tri Nations. I'll look at all of the games that took place in the 8 Nations tournament, check in on the ladies' game, see what is happening. I know people have been saying that I've not had a guest for a while, so hopefully next week I will have a guest on the podcast. Obviously, you can follow me on Twitter at Top 2 Inches RP. You can get the episodes in the feed there weekly, or on other platforms such as Anchor, YouTube, Apple Podcast and Spotify. Thanks for listening, and I will see you for episode 8 very soon.